UK police arrive at a man's house to arrest him for his Xbox 360 gamer tag for racism and hate speech against Asians. I'm not gonna say the man's username because I don't want to get in trouble. The UK promptly dropped the case once they realized that the man was half Chinese. Here's the actual post by the guy with the gamer tag on r/legalvice. I cannot speak today. r/legalvice UK. Under the username subject mistake 5315 or 5315 if you want. I'm not picky. Police called at my house to speak to me over my offensive username on Twitter. They immediately decided no action would be taken. I've had an account on Twitter or X now for like 15 years. I used the same username on there as I did for my Xbox gamer tag back on the 360. Someone has decided to report it because part of a word in it. Police called asking to speak to me. My roommate was in and answered the door. Then put me on speakerphone with them. They told me a complaint had been made and they needed to speak with me about an offensive term in my username. I told them I'd be back home at 6 p.m. from work. Police called back at 7:45 p.m., saw me, then said they wouldn't be taking it any further. Is that it? They didn't arrest me or anything? They made it sound like it was an urgent matter over the phone. And then they just dropped it like that. I've never been in trouble with police before or anything. This whole experience was very new to me. Don't I need to go and speak to a solicitor or anything? Am I even clear now? Honestly, I don't know. However, he did reply about this when someone asked about it. I don't know what the Y word is. My username is something like, and you know, I can't say it, but it's on there on the screen. I'm literally Chinese, and my friends back when I was 13 all used to have stupid names for each other like that. It just stuck. And also, why are you giving me weird boober ads, CapCut? That's just weird. And very inappropriate at a time like this. Anyway. Drawn Ismail Bob Tanner replied to Obvious Rises with, so crimes are dependent on the perpetrator? Which makes sense because you are not punished for sexual crimes in the UK as long as you belong to a certain religion or race. A law isn't if it's dependent on group. It just means there are levels of social slavery in the UK. Mr. Obvious replied, yeah, hate crimes aren't even real. They are just anti-white laws. That's it. They never apply any actual hate, just anything that can be used against white people. Meaning, yes, the government is very complicit in committing hate crimes here in the UK. All the more reason for President Donald J. Trump to come over and punch the Nazi Prime Minister in the face. I will never consider Starmer a part of the Jewish religion. He needs to stay well the fuck away from Cyberpunk Jordan. Swamp Rat Watch replied, "This would be comical if they weren't willing to destroy a man's life over a mildly edgy gamer tag." Honestly, that reply, pretty based. But of course, Mr. Obvious has to point out, well, the obvious. Bro, the UK police literally found 1 to 2 underage girls being gang raped by Muslims. They call them Asians. They aren't. Neither are Indians. And they arrested the girls for prostitution. I swear if they ever visit Bongland, I'm being the shit out of the first copper I see. Even remotely stepping out of line. What are they gonna do? Shoot me? They don't even have guns. Okay, this is not true for 2 reasons. One, all Muslims are rapists or terrorists. Just the IRG sleeper cell agents that we have in this country just being allowed to run amok due to certain government members' negligence to properly look into the safety risks of it, especially the MP or head of security and safety in this country, Saban Mahmood, because my people shall be free. Which, honestly, I just want to say, the fact that she's allowing to just say, yeah, let's lump in terrorists with decent, hardworking Muslim citizens in the UK makes me want to vote for Stuart Britain even more. And honestly, that makes me feel guilty even more so. So, either way, I can only advise decent-hearted Muslim people just to move to Dubai, where it's safer. On both accounts. Usman replied to both Captain Obvious, not Captain, Mr. Obvious, and Swamp Rat Watch with, "At Grok, is this claim true about girls being raped in front of police?" Grok replied, "The claim draws from Rotherham. The claim draws from the Rotherham scandal, which happened between 1997 to 2013. The 2014 J report and later inquiries from BBC, Guardian, IOPC confirmed that 1,400 girls, mostly underage, were gang raped and groomed by groups of predominantly British Pakistani men. South Yorkshire police often classified the victims as child prostitutes or troublesome, failing to act despite awareness. Some girls were arrested for minor offenses like disorder, while abusers went free. The scale far exceeds 1 to 2. No verified cases of rape literally went in front of officers. The recent 2025 probes arrested ex-officers for abusing victims in police cars. Ouch. Yeah, not really making me feel any safer without having pepper spray or my BB gun. Lynette, Met Police. But do your due diligence. Is it not possible for the UK police to be tarred and feathered? Or just beaten up for being scum? Mr. Obvious replied to that with, British people are fucking cowards. They cry and moan, and they still vote Liberal. They refuse to go hard right. A lot of them deserve it at this point. Again, not true. So far, Restore Britain is currently at 4th place at the polls for the next general election, and I'd like to see the numbers get up on that. So obviously, Mr. Obvious, you need to do a better job at convincing the reform voters to do some due diligence and research on who they're voting for. Because, I'm sorry, if being an ethno-net means making sure that decent Muslims aren't lumped in with actual terrorists, as well as not wanting stupidity. Oh, hey, family life. Anyway. Then, yeah, I'd rather vote Restore Britain than Reform UK. White people, lol, replied to Mr. Obvious saying, the UK would arrest a net. The UK would arrest a man for a name, but wouldn't arrest a man raping a child in front of him. Lurkmore TV also replied, saying, this sort of thing happens when you're no longer a real country. Biffle also replied, it's funny because the law specifically states that it doesn't matter if a complaint is unreasonable, but the police didn't want the bad optics for arresting a Chinese guy for being Chinese. Due to Starmer's constant visits? Yeah, I wonder why. If you know, you know. Gurkitos also replied to Mr. Obvious saying, the biggest black pill is all the people in the comments on that post talking about him being arrested for this crime if he was right. Like it's totally normal and an acceptable thing. Crazy. It really is. Snarky FemVet also said in the replies, but Katie Hopkins can't call herself a spaz? Interesting. This home visit had to have completely malfunctioned the brains of the police that showed up to take him into custody. That is honestly true. Best Brown Geek replied, but the police in the UK won't show up to theft, robbery, assault, etc. This country is a joke. Well, there's a cure for that, and that is letting the President of the United States of America punch our Nazi Prime Minister in the goddamn motherfucking face. Again, I do not think he's of any right to even claim he's of the same religion as Cyberpunk Jordan, who is a pretty decent guy, and you should definitely check out his channel. Link in the description. But other than that, yeah. All you can do is send pray that Rupert Lowe gets enough votes for his party, like the rest of us, buddy. Tony Knox also replied with, the Chinese do not see themselves as victims. They regard their culture as something to be proud of. The ignorance of the Rokarati is hilarious. Exactly. I mean, we have people who believe Hassan Piker for believing that ICE is the quote-unquote Gestapo, when in reality, we see people committing genocide of innocents just because of their religion, especially in England now specifically, as well as other parts of the UK, with some Muslims, especially Muslim politicians, promising in their campaign elections to erase anyone who's a Christian. Yikes. But hey, at least that proves which side of the Muslim spectrum they're on. And it's not the decent human being side. It's definitely the terrorist side. Just bring the extinction also replied, how precisely did we know where to find him? This would mean the police have unwarranted access to his physical home address from an ISP or the game company. I'm not versed in UK TV and internet laws. Does everyone online, whether they use anonymous tags or not, have their physical locations exposed to authorities 24/7? Is everyone pre-doxed? Well, to be fair, the UK, alongside Mark Zuckerberg, the guy who, the CEO of Meta, and also created Facebook, which brought him and Meta fame and fortune, more so now just fame, have actually funded global surveillance. This also includes for places such as Discord or any other platform that wants social digital verification. Yeah. Capper Hashtag Stop Bad Kids Act. aka Stop Bad Kids Act, replies, "It'd be even more hilarious if it's his actual name. I wore this to work as a PC bait for fun. Of course, I got my Asian card, so I never got into any trouble for it." Stevo also replies, "Great British police these days being like, and that gif has relevancy in more ways than one. Like, leave the poor dogs alone. What the fuck did they ever do to you?" Peter Owen replied, "Related. On June 19th, 2017, the US Supreme Court ruled 8 out of 0 in favor of the slants in the case Mattel v. Town, holding that the disparagement clause of the Lanham Act violated the First Amendment's free speech clause. And I probably butchered some of that. I'm sorry. King Possum Mitch replied with a very odd meme. Mr. Chow replied with, "Isn't the UK okay with males identifying as females? What's stopping someone from identifying as Chinese?" Honestly, even though you could make the argument of that, especially with how lefty loony the current government in power is, and they would just think of anyone who's actually from places like China and Japan as white adjacent, that doesn't mean you should. Studgear also replied, "UK police will investigate a man for being Chinese and take part in gang raping children." Pascal Lassie also replied, "Well, if you've seen Rush Hour, for instance, you'll remember that black folks use the N-word all the time." But when Chinaman Samurai Jack Chang tries to fit in, he soon finds out it's not a universal standard for fondness. Any word can become derogatory with some intent. Doesn't mean it's always true, though. Charlie G also replied, "Before you feel sorry for them there, forget what they voted for and keep voting for. In one big election cycle, they could easily stop this." Exactly. Voting Restore Britain would be the answer to that problem. Elisa Kiltacular also replied, "So it was over his ex username, and he mentions his 360 gamertag he used to have. This is what they took from us. Funny, goofy stuff that everyone normal laughed at is now deemed and you put and in there. Is now deemed an arrestable offense. Twenty-one Pentium replied, accurate depiction of that Bobby, with an Ampho donkey wearing a police uniform. Honestly, makes sense at this point. E for Fire replied with, UK out here wasting taxpayer money on some nonsense. Target also replied, police showed up at his door over a gamertag he had for 15 years. Found out he was actually Chinese and dropped it. Couldn't make this up if you tried. Don't mind me replied, Reddit removed this post and the user. Can't say that I'm surprised. With an image showing this post is locked, you won't be able to comment on the said post. That's just stupid. A guy down under replied, seriously though, that's a fall under cause offense or whatever it is. No one online knows he's Chinese. He should have been arrested. No, he shouldn't. The law is fucked up, but if anyone is arrested for this, then everyone should be. True. B. Norman also replied, these UK lapdogs don't deserve to be called police. You don't get to be called that if you are obeying the government overreach on their citizens. I really hope people in the UK start calling them lapdogs too. Oh, I will just call them stupid if they're like that. But there are some outliers. Like that one woman who fought off against a group of Muslims in her local area where she was patrolling, making sure that everyone had the right to preach, including those of Christian faith. God Arguments also replied, imagine if they were colorblind in enforcement of these laws. Jewish guy brags about how Jews control the media. Hate crime charts. Black guy drops M-bombs. Hate crime charts. Anyone non-white straight Christian makes self-deprecating joke. Hate crime charts. Yeah, that wouldn't be fair on them either. Uncommon Sense also replied, that sounds like selective enforcement. How is it okay for this guy but not another one? Saboteur VT also replied, so did the police get arrested for being racist to a Chinese man? I hope they do. I really do. Mr. Mojo Rising Jr. III replied with, UK went from God Save the Queen to just a DEI drama queen. With a gift from SNL. Caneless replied with saying government that punishes women and girls for defending themselves against rapists and pedophiles trying to essay them, by the way. And some people wonder why the UK always seems to be on the verge of a civil war. I mean, we are getting pretty close to one right now. And honestly, this is why I'm asking all my Muslim viewers just to move to places like Dubai, where it's probably a lot safer for you. Especially after President Trump sorts out the Strait of Hormuz. Brian M replies, but that doesn't matter, right? Because we're all equal in the eyes of the law. Laws that favor one race over another wouldn't be legal. Tell that to Sabah Mahmood, who still defends terrorists being lumped in with decent Muslims because my race. Yeah. And you wonder why I would vote for Restore Britain. The Real Dark Soul also replied, get burgled, phone robbed, raped by Pakistanis at the age of 13, the police do nothing, won't even show up. But a username on Xbox and they're all over it. Something is deeply wrong with our justice system and the police force. You're telling me. And honestly, it's no wonder why Rupert Lowe says that the best way to help to defend ourselves is pepper spray. But I don't know, man. Give it enough time, eventually, people will just let me carry Lynette for my own safety. Lynette's the name of my BB gun, by the way. Penta, aka The Penta, 82 replied, is there someone in the UK protesting, or at least advocating against this policing? They mostly seem okay with it. It's not like a big political cause. Actually, there is. I mentioned this party multiple times in this video. It's Restore Britain, which is run by Rupert Lowe, someone who was kicked out unfairly from Reform UK for whatever reason. But honestly, it's kind of not surprising considering how Reform UK is now currently filling up its own chairs with former Labour and Conservatives who were part in the Boris wave. Mark Frank also replied, it's okay when we use that word. That's why I can say the word retard. I got the grades and test scores to prove it. Same. I am clinically a retard. Yorkshire Wurzel also replies, this is funny, but sad at the same time. Police seem acceptable to investigate a Chinese gamer with a Chinese username, but don't put in the same amount of effort to prosecute geo-raping gangs and Islamic terrorists and hate preachers. That is true. There have been a lot of hate preachers in the Muslim community recently. If we're gonna keep mosques in this country, we really need to kick out the bad apples. Reggie VJ also replied, could have been a dangerous thug. Tina Relton replied, love this. This is typical of our police force. Being used for petty alleged racial crimes when there are actual criminal acts that totally get ignored. Well, not totally. I mean, Rupert Lowe just brought back up the inquiry into the grooming gangs. Pete Dog replied as well, the difference between Soviet-style anti-speech raids and the modern UK's is that the UK is way more gay and interestingly open about it. The latter part is interesting because at least the Soviets knew what they were doing was wrong and guiltily lied about it to hide it. I never thought about it that way. I just thought the UK was heterophobic towards straight white men as all fucking hell, regardless of whether or not they were Christian. Ray Nimatori replied with, this is just identity politics. Doesn't matter which laws were violated. It only matters which are identities the violator and victim, if applicable, has. The further you are from... Oh god, I can't believe I have to say this. The word I consider a slur, by the way. Cishet, white male, the more you can get away with, including murder and rape. Chris Bartlett replied with, seems like British police are acting in a racist manner. Call the cops, I guess? Yeah, I don't think that's going to work. Unless you're talking about that nice cop who let Christian preachers preach. Bert Trent replied, overrun by immigrants that rape and stab everything they see, and the UK still wastes their time going after somebody's speech. What happened to rest and freedoms? Countries like this are no better than any in the Middle East. True. And considering Iran is currently still being run by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, or the IRGC, who are also known for throwing gay people off of buildings, specifically skyscrapers. I fear it's only a matter of time before that happens here in the UK as well, unless we do something about it. Jay Galvin also replies with, didn't stop the Canadian government from shutting down Hunky Bells, a Hungarian restaurant in Canada run by a Hungarian immigrant way back in the 80s or 90s. Ouch. Jinseikan, aka Valkyrion, also replied, this shows the lack of seriousness these governments have. Getting all hot and bothered for some stupid harmless usernames instead of going and chasing real crime like people being violent in hotels physical abusers, sex abusers, and thieves. John Sibley, or John Sybil 99. I'm just gonna call you John Sibley because I'm pretty sure your tag is a lot longer. Replied with, the worst part about these stories is that this government is one they really are trying. That this is government one. They really are trying to stop free speech. I notice they don't call on black people for calling their friends the N word. Different strokes for different folks, I reckon. Alan Talks Sense also replies, it's offensive that police allocate time to this when they had no intention of doing anything from the start, as if they knew it was dumb. And when hundreds of thousands of serious crimes go uninvestigated every year. Let's put that into perspective. A gamer tag that some Karen might find offensive is easily going to get the police to show up at your doorstep, while actual rape and child abuse, or just any kind of abuse in general, including domestic abuse, which I thought we were able to stop with an official helpline for that, by the way. Go uninvestigated. Every 12 months. Like, what the fuck? Lenny Nichols replied to the post, this is the caliber of our police force. Heaven help us. In the Antifa, replied, there are two types of UK pigs. Sadists who enjoy repressing people, masochists who get off being humiliated in public for repressing people. TopCat75 replied with, maybe you should have more gamer tags like White English Scum or Filthy English Pig, or Filthy English Pig, and see if it gets offensive enough for gaffers to come. Or maybe it's only if you are writing English and have a name that doesn't resemble you. Stardiver replies with a meme. POV, you just got Chinese. Silver Midge, aka John Irving, replied with, so much for our superb intellectual police force. Marco Onionen replied with, UK is not a serious country. It's the warning example for everyone else. What happens when the left gets to lead? Pure insanity and opinion crimes among all kinds of dystopian hell stuff. True. David Milliken also replied, a lot of Brits would know CCC is from old British nursery rhymes. CCC bought a bunny doll. He washed it. He cleaned it. He names it Pretty Paw. He sent for the doctor, but the doctor didn't come because he had a pimple on his bum. Sal, aka Farrell, replied to this, saying it was me on Reddit who asked, was it the Y word? Because I've seen some handles with the Y word in them and think no, those shouldn't be allowed. If a guy was if a guy was black, should he be allowed to call himself Mick the N-word? What level of slur do you think is acceptable? Again, depends on the community and the race. Ben Allen replied to this, saying, fucking idiots. Wow, British law enforcement are such a joke. Holy crap. Legendary Hamster replied, reminds me of a quote-unquote run-in, not with police, at a shared house I used to live in. A few of us were in the kitchen talking about our parents, and one said, my parents own a chinky in Norwich, which set off another housemate saying that was racist, to which the reply was, we're Chinese. The Dave Gaming replied, did you even read the post? Or are you just making shit up because you know you get paid more from Twitter if you lie and rage bait? Honestly, it kinda depends with Reddit, but I think this is going to be true, if anything. Comer also replied, love this story, there's hope for humanity. Monica P. also replied, and this is why the British need to toss out the current government. What idiots! Kate Rapley also replied, I wonder if the police realize that 40-plus-year-old people are using tags and usernames we made up when we were teenagers. Some of them weren't the most mature or had any thought for the future. Mark Jones replied, did the Keystone Cops en masse move to Albion and propagate there, with the genome for lack of common sense finally manifesting once Labour became the majority in the Commons in the 21st century? The Jesterhead replied, amazing that the UK can just casually have separate laws based on ethnicity. Trust me, you wouldn't know the half of it. Tanner Risenhut also replied, so they decided not to pursue charges when they saw that he was indeed a Ching Chong Chinaman. I mean, that's what the message is, right? Actually, no, it's a gamer tag, but still. Jurassic Farts replied, stupid thing under our hates Zorit's laws. It does not have to be offensive speech from the speaker. Just the receiver needs to be offended. So they could have proceeded on behalf of all Chinese despite him being Chinese. If this was done in Australia, yeah, probably the same thing, to be honest. RW72100 replied, "It's either offensive or it isn't, just because this dude was Asian. Doesn't mean other Asians wouldn't be offended by it. Let's be honest. They were there for a white guy." Honestly, it really doesn't matter either way. Four Oak, aka Faith and Funds, also replied, "My country is becoming the first chapter of the Gulag Archipelago with these spurious arrests. We need to fight back immediately. We can't let this happen." True, we can't. Spirit Protector also replied, "Imagine being subhuman in IQ level to the point where you believe the zero context post without any further evidence than just using it to rage bait yourself into saying it's anti-white laws." Fucking other dregs of society. Well, that's a bit rude. Piper Sabrig replied, "So if I were writing McCracker, Mr. Whitebread to you, it's all cool, right?" Hazel Mason replied with, "I don't know if that's true or not, but wouldn't surprise me in the slightest. And that's the worrying bit. Playground enforcers." Exactly. "You just can't make this," just another guy replies with, "You just can't make this stuff up." Neo Resident replies with, "Be the UK. Racist gamer tag is mean to Chinese. Armed team breaks in door. Ready to beat up mean Englishman. Sees guy is Chinese, quietly leaves. Never mind, lol, oops. Chinese guy be confused on Reddit, what just happened?" Alea Music also replies, "I don't know, seems fishy. Especially since you could only have 15 characters in the gamer tag, so Ching Chong Chinaman wouldn't fit since that's 18. I hate the UK police as much as anybody, but I don't buy it." True. And all I'm gonna say here on this is just to take every bit of information from the actual story itself with a grain of salt. The last Waspif also replied, "How did they identify who this person was? And where they lived before even having any charges raised? You think it's likely Twitter hands over data like that on a whim? Sounds like bollocks." Honestly, I feel like that's more Microsoft. Also, let's not forget, the UK is funding global surveillance. Reform Fitness Academy replies with, "Great gamer tag, that is. The hashtag Popo are living in clown world. Absolute Marsons, the lot of them." Kapikura replied with, "Hello, Mr. Chung. We need to speak with you urgently about your racist gamertag. Lol, UK police so retarded they cannot even tell an M-word is Chinese from his last name." H2514 replied, "And that's how thick and clueless our police are. Arresting a Chinese man on his Xbox instead of being out on the streets to protect the community from unfettered scum. Cannot speak today." Dollarus also replied, "The joke writes itself. Police. We got a racist pig bastard dog to arrest. Let's go!" Police. "We're here for Ching Chong Chinaman. Where is he?" "Ching Chong Chinaman. Here I am." "And that's racist." Horsehead replied, "Why is it no longer offensive? None of the people seeing that username will know the ethnicity of a player. It just shows how pointless these laws are." Mike Bernatzes replied as well, "Liberals forcing everyone to live by their moral ideas. They turn a tolerant society into an intolerant one." Charles, aka Baller Leclerc, also replied to this. That's not been a viable gamertag since maybe 2012, 2015 at the absolute latest. A real one would know that eventually the time came where Xbox/Microsoft literally forced gamertag changes as if it was even close to offensive. Getting a free change or forced to pay them $10 was a true 50-50. Apollo also replied to this with, "How do they have time for this?" unironically asking. Punset Bishop also replied with, "You couldn't make it up." The Minds Oracle also replied with, "Americans, this is what you want to be like? You won't even be allowed to choose your own screen names. That's not freedom." True, I see a lot of Democrats LARPing as Republicans in US Congress. Mr. President, you need to sort that out. Mead and Cornwall Cat replied with, "What a pathetic use of our police time and our tax money. What on earth have they become? Quite frankly, it's embarrassing." True. Jake Bradley, aka Jake Brad9, replied with, "So the police were racist then for assuming. Why weren't they immediately arrested for being offensive racists?" Paul Morris replied with, "I'd better change mine then from ranking to something different, as I could be held accountable to Chinese people and the king." Stephen Jardine replied with, "No police involvement, but years ago, I read about guy kicked off Xbox permanently for his gamertag, something like Big Night, short for Nigel, as people were complaining it was racist." How is Big Night, short for Nigel, racist? I don't know. What the frick? Gannon McCollum replied with, "I know this guy was fun to play with." Papa Stack replied, "It's the police who were being racist." True. Dark Reflections UK Limited replied with, lol, almost as good as Katie Hopkins hates beating herself. Hashtag Spazgate. Another acorn replied with, the greatest irony of the UK leaving dystopian anti-European Union is British elites turning their country into an even bigger dystopian hellhole than the EU itself. User 2060X replies with, the agenda of psychological pressure to make you fear and control continues. Turbo Salem replies with, UK cops should get slapped the fuck up next time they arrive to someone's house for some dumb shit like this while they allow and cover for rapists. A fan account for Nick Wilde also replied with, so in a sweeping effort to stop racism in the UK, they have conceded that it's okay to be racist in the UK as long as you are born the race being offended. Interesting logic. Your humble host replied with, the UK police are such an embarrassment. Kay Highland replied, so there's now a forbidden C word as was the Yank N word, then of course there's the P word. Sean replied with, that's because the UK is corrupt as hell. And he needs to burn just corrupt this America because the UK has a handle for cooking drug trafficking just like America does too. So they just as corrupt as America for UK. Actually, not true. And also, the only political violence I want is for President Donald J. Trump to punch that fucking Nazi Prime Minister in the goddamn face. I keep saying. Mark Wright replies, our two-tier police are an embarrassing laughingstock. They have lost all respect from the public as they are just armored political anti-white British enforcers. True. John Claude replied with, you can imagine all the jumpy copper faces dropping when he entered the door. Plus James also replied with, either the tag is offensive to a third party or it's not. The law is mad, but the two-tier application is madder. Ron Johnman replied with, under globalism, laws only exist to harass white people. True. German American Knight, I'm not going to say the entire name, replied with, the police force that birthed the bumbling genius Inspector Lestrade, but not Sherlock Holmes, should be viewed accordingly. Pete Smith replied with, institutional racism. Not arrested because he wasn't white. Bring back free speech. Exactly. Locuti of the Borg replied with, proof positive that these commie rules are only for the native-born white people. Walk steadfastin replied with, they should have arrested him. Him being Chinese is no excuse since he was clearly offensive to a British passport holder somewhere. Thomas McKean, RMBSN, replied with, I can picture the police short-circuiting over that one. Nino Skopak replied, I don't even feel uncomfortable. At Nino Skopak replied, I don't even feel comfortable replying what I think because I could be next. True. Big Winners replied, Asians, tuned to a higher than average IQ, can make and laugh at jokes, whereas certain other groups seem to respond only with violence. Ouch. Citizen Art Disc, no offense, replied with double standards. Could still be racist even if he was Chinese himself. William Marshall replied, That's funny as fuck. The police are no longer police, are nothing but hired thugs. And they should be treated like hired thugs. Ventilator replied, A lot of Battlefield 2042 gamers had offensive, racist, and sexual usernames. And no one ever cared, including Electronic Arts. Sam, aka Salbar88, replied, Surprised they didn't arrest him anyway. Tracy Johnson replied, My son's username was Corner Shop and he was banned. Alan Creswell replied with, What a wonderful use of police time and resources. What a joke. Super Geek K96 replied, Report it back to the police that you're a victim of a hate crime. Crawford Martinsano replied with, The UK must have no real crime happening if their police force can spend time on this shit. You can't be serious, Susie replied with, Yet police do nothing about blatant calls for the death of Jews in our major towns and cities, as well as the death of Christians. Can't forget the Christians. A spirit Wittig, that's a long name, replied with, The UK police is using resources to charge people over internet usernames? How absurd is that? Alms replied with, And then you took off the cynical mask. Nice one, sir. Salute. Mikey F. Productions replied, Oh my god, this country is a complete joke. Felice Tell replied, A quote-unquote racist term immediately rendered non-racist the moment the quote-unquote right person says it. Sendu replied, The story is true, but they didn't go to arrest him, just to have a talk with him. Just because someone called the police on him. Name cannot be blank, replied with, If only this were some kind of figment of your imagination. If only you had a real job. Oh well. Gate Boy replied, Does this make the police racist? Sibelia replied, If crime is defined by context, isn't it more of a philosophical issue rather than a judicial one? Soldier's Champion replied, The joke writes itself, with a gif of a scene of the Joker laughing from Batman the Animated Series. Marco Nassis replied with, haha, unfortunately it costs the taxpayer, but yeah, still funny. Faustian Weger replies, this would be funny if it wasn't a direct example of race-specific policing. Hussey, Foot Frazzle Glow, replies with, I've played games long enough to know people only report your name when you beat them. So the guy or girl that got called out for this, or made the call to arrest the guy, known as Ching Chong Chinaman, ended up being a sore loser. H2O Free iOS replied, call yourself Chinese. State authority assumes you are racist before assuming you actually are Chinese. Utterly Foxed replied, being offended in the UK is worse than being gang raped. How is that even possible? Anyway. Jazz Wellbow replied with, it seems like it's time to wipe that shithole previously known as the UK and start fresh. With a meme of Jesus smoking, with the words flooded again. Reaver replied with, a punishment for false tribunal by the state would be death for the accusing party. The whole issue isn't that we have a tier justice system. It's that the authorities have zero accountability. Ouch. Yeah, I hate my own country. Jimmy Haha replied, so folks, this certainly leads to a greater question. If you could name yourself in the most offensive way possible, what would you be called? I'll start. Big Nose McJewface. Pythagorean Girl replied, saying, so basically these laws don't apply if you're not right. Wow. Dilemma Llama replied with, he must be an OG gamer to grab that name. Grimdork or Rogue Kaiser replied, these people are ruining lives more than any silly racist jokes on the internet could ever hope to. Clicks42 replied, reason number 40,976. Why the UK will and should never be taken seriously. Ouch. JH replied, well, being in deep hole looks like this. Culture lost, culture changed, culture gone forever. Ching Chong's won. Ow. Jock McJock replied with, holy shit, I'm in trouble then. I'd better change my handle to Shreddy Sock or Porridge Wog. Mostly Modest Mostly replied, I really wish the tea-sipping Brits would grow a pair. For Organization Kid replied with, UK police are going to face serious consequences after the Civil War. Yep, there's gonna be a Civil War, alright. Steve of the Great replied, literally can't make it up. I hope the police felt stupid when they turned up and saw an Asian guy. Sniper Tone 79 replied, "This country is getting worse by the day. Storm has gotta go and not by resignation." So you're either asking for him to be arrested or for someone to actually commit an act of political violence. As long as it's a politician, I think it's okay. Like President Trump. He's a punch that Nazi to fucking death. Delaney Designs replied, "Surely this can't be real. We're supposed to take a Reddit post as evidence these days? I mean, take it with a grain of salt if you want." Nick Hawley 13 replied, "Welcome to the communist technocracy. Orwell tried to warn us." True. Lost in Space replied, "Is it legal to have all phobias in the UK? Or just Islamophobia? Surely having a fear of being beheaded, stabbed, or blown up is rational?" Yeah. I highly doubt the current government in power agrees with that. Yellow Snow replied, "There's no way people actually believe this is real, surely. Average IQ going down clearly." "Oh, but this has happened before? No, people who are on probation for recently charged assault are violating their terms, but nobody is getting arrested for a Nobody is quote unquote getting arrested for a Facebook post." LMFAO. Yeah, tell that to Katie Hopkins, who literally got arrested and spent roughly 2 years in prison over a post she made on X. Sacred Ever replied with, if he was right, he would have been arrested. 2-tier system." Voidwalker replied, "Lamau at Omega Level 3 friend. Imagine the police showing up over this. LMAO, we'd all be in prison." Lonely Mango replied, "The gamer tag is over the name limit. Really doubt they would come for you for your Xbox tag after 15 years. Chillorker G or Chill G69 replied, "The Mal, he should file a lawsuit. It's the easiest win." The Angry Discord mod replied, "If I had a UK account, I should call myself Wet Beans Spick. I wonder if they'll drop the case when they see my ethnicity." Miss Mazzy replied, "They are after writing McWhiteface, weren't they?" Master Chen 98 replied, "Chinaman, also the laziest slur ever. It's the literal translation of what Chinese people call themselves." Free the Way 2025 replies with, "This just means that they're racist themselves." Super QAX Club replied, "I mean, me and my bros sometimes call the M-word when one of us spoke something dumb, not entirely related to racism." Saftadun replied, "How dare we laugh at ourselves? Our sarcasm." Wizard of Lizards replies with, "Investigate rape gangs. Go after online usernames. Ding ding ding." Sucks, aka 82 Huzia, replied, "If it was me calling myself Cracker, I'd def be singing jail. I'd def be singing in a jail cell in the UK." Snow replied with, "I wish the UK police were this serious about real crime. It would be fucking paradise." Hoya OCE replied with, "What an amazing use of taxpayer money." Vackfish Belly replied, "Another fake Reddit post." Outdoors, aka at Freezing Hatchet, replied, "Not a serious country." EUK Biker replied, "The police are a joke these days. For fuck's sake. Why arrest someone for stuff they did when they were 13? For fuck's sake. If that's the case all the time, the police should be arrested for the same reason." Danny Nicholson also replied, "So a Chinese man can call himself Ching Chong Chinaman, and it's perfectly okay." But if a white man did it or a black man, it'd be racist? Get the fuck out of here. Jess replied, "This reads like a joke, even though it's sadly not." "Why are you gay?" replied with, "How did they know he wasn't an Englishman?" Miss Purple X replied, "Sorry, that's pretty funny. Our police really are bumbling fools." Clock, aka Crownswheel, replied, "I wonder how much worse the UK can get." Patrick replied, "How did they identify you from your Twitter username?" David Dizzy replied, "Chinese version of black people using the N-word." The Real Mute, 1987, replied, "I'm amazed he didn't get banned from Reddit over this shit." Oxbogan, or Boganbits, replied, "Don't forget, Ching Chong Chinaman is their word." Barky McFlufferson replied, "But what is the Y word?" "I don't know, and I don't want to get in trouble for finding out." The Knifeman replied, "The UK is being an absolute... the UK is beyond being an absolute joke at this point." Bobby Render replied with, "Agrok, this story is far too stupid to be true. So, is it?" With Grok replying, "Yeah, it's real." From a first-hand Reddit post in r/Legal Advice UK a few days ago. Guy's old Xbox gamer tag, Ching Chong Chinaman, carried over to Twitter X. Someone reported it as a act of racist hate speech. UK cops called, then visited his house to quote-unquote speak about the complaint. He saw he was Chinese, dropped in on the spot, no arrest, but they showed up anyway. Classic. At least an AI has more of a sense of humor than the UK police. Holy shit. Hex Investor replied with, "Liar, as it's over 15 letters." Rosie Kerrigan replied, "That's so UK police. Thick as mints." Yorkshire Wurzel again replied with, "My old man, former Met Police, and AS will be turning in his grave over shit like this if he was capable of seeing what the police are up to today. Ouch. Azazel Velast replied with, UK police are a bipedal joke. I do drink coffee replied with, 1984. Sorry, I'm still gonna keep using that reference. Meganingus, or Mega N-words, if you really want to make that joke, replied with, how are Brits tolerating this law? Literally treated worse than slaves. Keith James M91 replied with, the fucking UK police need arresting. Pathetic cunts help cover up child rape but get serious about this. Daddy Duke replied with, the UK is so fucked. They crack jokes about our government controlling everything, and yet, here's this shit. Zizu Zhangzhou replied, with that logic, they should have arrested J.K. Rowling. LMFAO. Leave her out of this. However, they did show a image from 4chan with it being an Asian character in the entire franchise. Name is Ching Chong. Yeah, that was definitely more on Warner Brothers' part there. Casual Drifter and Games replied, yeah, because we are all well aware that police are racist arseholes. Aethelswin replied with, bullshit story. The police would have had his name and would have assumed from his name that he was Chinese. Mr. Note replied, the UK is worse than China or Russia, I swear. Secretica replied, he actually did have a license for that. This kind of means that the concept of an M-word pass is officially recognized by the UK government. Lin 67704. I know how many people are gonna make that meme after I said that slowly. Replied with, shouldn't matter what color the guy is. That's a funny name. Voidly AI even replied, cases like this show how blunt speech enforcement can become in practice. When authorities start policing usernames or old online speech, it often leads to outcomes that look arbitrary and undermine trust in the system. Skynet Apocalypse replied with, milk pincers. Charla Pagella replied with, what the fuck is wrong with this communism going on here? What the fuck is wrong to this communism going wrong here? Avora, aka Truthseeker, replied, Chinese man with Chinese... Well, I guess I'm not reading the comments there. Anyways, what do you think of this situation? Let me know down in the comment section below. And I'll see you next time for hopefully a Let's Play video. Seriously, I want to play Hogwarts Mystery, not deal with this stuff, but them's are bigs, I guess.